It's a Miserable Life is a very funny episode, but with some really moving moments and a really lovely message as well. This is the 4th episode of the 2nd season of The Golden Girls. It's directed by Terry Hughes, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts along the way. And it starts off with a petition, and we don't know what the petition is for maybe 1 or 2 minutes. We find out quite quickly it's a petition to stop the city from cutting down this tree. And unfortunately, one of the stumbling blocks is a character called Frieda Claxton. And we learn very quickly that she's not a nice person. But Rose thinks that people who are not very nice just need to be shown a bit of kindness, and they can then show that in return. The others are not interested in this theory. They don't think that it's true. Rose tries to provide an example with a story about a person called Ernest T. Minky, and as soon as she begins the story, Blanche declares that she's hungry, and Blanche, Sophia, and Dorothy all go to the kitchen to escape the story. We do end up hearing a little bit more about Ernest T. Minky as Rose comes in, and then the next thing we know, Rose has actually been visiting Frieda Claxton. She's been giving her food and has changed her mind as far as we know, and she's going to go down to this meeting at City Hall, and this is where we are. And I think the setting was really, really well filmed. The angles were really great, and it turns out Mrs. Claxton has changed her mind again, and she is in favour of chopping down this tree. And Mrs. Claxton is not a nice character, but she's brilliantly played. She's portrayed by Nan Martin, and she was a nasty person, but I loved watching her. I thought she was a very fascinating character. And Rose, at the meeting, Rose says something that prompts Frieda Claxton to say the words, "I hate you," to Rose. And because Rose thinks that everybody should be kind to each other and everybody should respect each other, which is fair enough, of course, that display of hatred towards her is enough to flip her around temporarily from being all sickly sweet, and she storms over to Frieda Claxton in front of everybody else and loses it and tells her to shut up, and she tells her that they're going to have their say about the tree, and she delivers this so wonderfully. It's a side of Rose we don't see that often, and it's very clear that this is fueled by her passion for kindness and goodness and respect, and she tells Frieda Claxton, if you don't like it, you can drop dead. Rose goes to walk back to the other girls, and Frieda Claxton drops dead. It sounds like it shouldn't be funny, but within the context of the episode, it's very, very well done. And I love Rose's double take. She walks back, and then out of the corner of her eye, she sees that everybody's kind of bustling around on the other side, and then she kind of double takes and realizes what's happening. And we learn that Rose can't sleep. She's in the kitchen. They're talking about the fact that nobody seems to even care. Frieda Claxton isn't even having a funeral because there's nobody who cares to organise it. And then we get an anecdote from Blanche to keep things a little bit lighter about how Blanche faked her own death when she was 16, which meant she got to see her own funeral. It's a bizarre story, but it was a nice little bit of something just a little bit more light-hearted, because it is quite heavy. And Sophia says that she would actually go to Frieda Claxton's funeral because, and I quote, well, actually this is a quote from Rose, where Rose echoes what Sophia said, and she said, "It's to show the man upstairs that you have regard for human life," which is fair enough. And they all decide that actually they will. They'll put their money together. They'll have I'm laughing because I know what comes next. They put their money together. They're going to have a funeral for Frieda Claxton, and they go to the funeral parlour, and this is one of the funniest scenes from Golden Girls, I think, all because of a character's name. And we have this character played by Thom Sharp, and he's called Mr. Pfeiffer. They do call him Mr. Pfeiffer to begin with, and he corrects them and says it's Pfeiffer, the P is silent. And he initially thinks they're planning for Sophia's funeral, and there's this beautiful moment where she steps forward, and there are a couple of seconds between him saying that and Sophia responding, and we know Sophia is going to say something brilliant, and she does. She says, and I quote, "Hey, Pfeiffer, how would you like a punch in your face?" Absolutely love it. My delivery doesn't do it justice, but I howled with laughter. And there are a couple of more, I think there was a funeral from Dorothy, and I think a couple of other puffers throughout it, which I thought was brilliant. And to quote Dorothy, "We are bereaved on a budget, so they're trying to do this funeral as cheaply as possible," which I think is completely fair enough. And then We cut immediately to the funeral. They're all wearing black, which is a contrast from the scene where they're at the parlour, because they're actually wearing quite brightly coloured clothing there. So it's quite a transition, and nobody is there apart from the four of them. And then somebody turns up, and I thought it was going in one direction, and maybe I'm quite a pessimist, but on this occasion I was actually seeing something positive, because this woman approaches the casket and starts giving this speech about how the person in the casket or the coffin was a good person and they did all of this charity work. And I was starting to think, maybe Frieda Claxton behind closed doors was a good person. She just didn't shout it out from the rooftops. Maybe she did donate a lot of money to charity, but she didn't go around telling people about it. I genuinely thought that's where it was going, that the message was going to be, somebody may seem bitter and horrible, but it doesn't mean they don't do good things. It doesn't mean they don't have value. Honestly thought that's where they were going. No, it was just the wrong person in the coffin. They thought it was somebody else's funeral, and it wasn't. The other funeral was next door. So that's not the direction they took. And I was surprised by that. And then she'd accidentally been cremated. And this worked really well, because at the end of the episode, Rose comes in all excited. She's found the perfect place to lay Frieda Claxton to rest. And I'd actually forgotten about the tree. I'd completely forgotten that was the whole point of the narrative. And she'd scattered her ashes around the tree and then told City Hall about it. And she made it very clear to City Hall that they probably don't want to disturb somebody's final resting spot. And I thought that was a really beautiful way to bring everything together. It's probably not what Frieda Claxton would have wanted if she was campaigning to have the tree knocked down, or if she was opposing keeping the tree, then it probably wasn't the best thing for her to be scattered there. But nevertheless, I thought it was a really nice way to tie everything together, and we have this gorgeous moment right at the end when they're all looking up at the tree. We can't see the tree, it's out of shot, but they're looking up and they're talking about the importance of making your life mean something while you're here to live it. And then Sophia ends on a comment about a dog peeing up the tree. And it was delightful. And I really thoroughly enjoyed it. And I thought it was a very, very funny episode. Definitely a lot of comedy. I genuinely laughed so hard at Sophia's response to the Pfeiffer face. It just amuses me so much how funny something can be just based on a character's name. I just think they did a beautiful job with it. But the episode as a whole was an absolute delight. It's a Miserable Life is a fabulous episode, very, very funny, but with some really moving moments and a meaningful message about the quality of life and what you bring to your own life and what you bring to other people. I thought it was lovely. Needless to say, this is a really brilliant episode of The Golden Girls.